Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. On va commencer la réunion.
We will start the meeting in a minute.
Their seats. We'll begin the council meeting in just one moment. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue au Conseil municipal de la Ville d'Ottawa pour le 8 mai.
Good morning.
So for Wednesday, May 8th. For those who are able to, would you please rise for prayer and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem. Almighty God, let us work together to serve all our people. Dieu Tout-Puissant, aidez-nous à travailler ensemble afin de bien servir nos citoyens. It's my pleasure to ask Councillor Hume to introduce our special guests from Canterbury who are going to lead us in the national anthem. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From the heart of Ottawa, of course, the finest ward in the city, and, of course, the best high school, my alma mater, no less. I'm pleased to bring to you the string quartet. All of the musicians are in grade 12 and pursuing music in post-secondary education. We have Connor Wynn and Stuart Oakes, who will be playing the violin, Carolyn Fernand, who will be playing the viola, and Ethan Mitchell, who will be playing the cello. In attending Canterbury, these young musicians have had the pleasure of working with high-level music teachers such as Laurie Hamilton, James Caswell, and John Poran. Canterbury's ensemble are well known in the local music community as skilled and hard-working groups. This reputation comes from their numerous performances at local festivals, special events, and Canterbury's very own music night, taking place this Thursday and Friday at 7 o'clock at Canterbury High School on Canterbury Avenue. Ladies and gentlemen, the Canterbury String Quartet.
Well, thank you very much to the students from Canterbury. Appreciate you being here to play that beautiful rendition of our national anthem. At this time, I'd like to invite Flora Love Katz to join me at this the center stage as we honor Flora Love with the Mayor's City Builder Award and her counselor, Councillor Diane Holmes, as well. Welcome. Since moving to Ottawa in 1975, Ms. Katz has volunteered literally thousands of hours of her time to important causes, notably in the arts.
Since moving to Ottawa in 1975, Ms. Katz has volunteered thousands of hours of her time to important causes, notably in the arts.
Three-year run with the Ottawa Symphony Orchestra, 20 years of singing soprano in the chorus of Opera Lyra, and serving as a lay cantor at her synagogue during the High Holy Days. In addition, she has given close to 110 blood donations through the Canadian Blood Services, worked as a big sister, and was a regular and welcome presence at her grandmother's retirement residence, where she organized monthly concerts. She has been an active board member at a long list of organizations, including the YMYWCA of Ottawa, CHEO Coinbox Committee, and the Ottawa School of Speech and Drama. What's clear when you read about and meet Ms. Katz is that she is an incredibly selfless person. Ce qui apparaît clairement lorsqu'on lit au...
We can see it when we read about her, that we learn that she is incredibly selfless person.
With no financial gain, but those who know her speak glowingly about a kind person that she is and how fortunate they are to know her. She is the type of person that our city is richer for having, and I speak on behalf of all of us on Ottawa City Council, and thanking you, Ms. Katz, for what you have done and what you continue to do for our community. It's great that your friends and family are with you, including your parents, Ruth and Leon, to celebrate, and I had the opportunity to meet both your parents at the Holocaust Remembrance ceremony at the War Museum, and found out at that time that your mother was right there as a Holocaust survivor, and your father as a member of the Order of Canada and the Order of Ontario. Very proud parents, and we're proud of your contributions as well. And it's my pleasure on behalf of City Council and your councillor, Diane Holmes, to present you with this meeting's City Builder Award. Congratulations.
I would like to begin by thanking the members of the Mayor's City Builders Award Selection Committee, Mr. Brooks Simpson in the Mayor's office, Maria Grant and Ian Smith, and others in the Protocol Office who pulled today's ceremony together. As a 35-year veteran of the Canadian Public Service, I would also like to thank Mayor Jim Watson, whose hard work during 2 terms as mayor, as provincial MPP, and whose genuine friendship I've cherished for many years. My own city councillor of Somerset Ward, Diane Holmes, whose also tireless efforts and friendship I've cherished for many years, and all of you city councillors, all of you whose devotion makes Ottawa the most beautiful, green, and lovely capital in the entire world. Last night at the Culture Beyond Borders concert, I mentioned to Councillor Shirelli how very honored I am to receive and am humbled by this Mayor City Builders Award. I love this city and everything Ottawa represents, notably as our nation's capital. And I'm very grateful to be permitted a couple moments to offer these thoughts and thanks to you all. In particular, it's meaningful for me to receive this prestigious award in the Andrew Hayden Hall because Andy was Reeve of Nepean Township and Regional Chair of the Ottawa-Carleton area from 1970 to 91. And I knew Andy and his wife Mary. They were close and cherished friends and neighbors. And as a licensed wedding officiant in the province of Ontario, in 2007, I had the honor of marrying Andy to his present wife, Sherry, the widow of former mayor of Nepean, Ben Franklin. Last month, as the mayor was mentioning, marked the 70th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And by a confluence of miraculous circumstances, my mother, Ruth, a survivor of Nazi Germany, was one of fewer than 4,000 Jewish people allowed into Canada between 1935 to 45. Dozens of our immediate families were turned back from the safety of our Canadian shores to the Nazi gas chambers where they were all murdered. Although beaten in Nazi Germany as a child and bullied in Canada because of her bad English, my mother grew up to spearhead anti-bullying programs and techniques in schools. She became an outstanding pedagogue of elementary, high school, university, and ultimately adults here in our Canada software industry, where she specialized in the English language, history, and art. She also taught kids with learning disabilities. And as Mayor Watson mentioned, my dad was born into abject poverty in Montreal. Canada was virulently anti-Semitic in the 40s and 50s. And at the time, there were park benches that said no dogs or Jews allowed. I don't know if there were any in Ottawa, but there sure were in Montreal. And there were limits imposed on every university in Canada, quotas limiting the number of Jews allowed into universities. But my father's genius and his quest will interest all of you young researchers in ovarian cancer, because he became the first biomedical engineer in Canada, pioneering the first heart-lung pump for open heart surgery, and for that and for many, many other medical devices that gentleman invented, he became an officer of the Order of Canada and the Order of Quebec, of Ontario. My own life has been colored by anti-Semitism from the time I was a child, by the Holocaust and by the colossal loss of talent and beauty of those 6 million murdered Jews, many other murdered, including 1 million Jewish children. Think of the colossal loss represented by these two. We are guilty, all of us, because we have a collective responsibility to prevent genocide, including Rwanda, for which we had all of the information. I have an intense, keen perspective that every one of us must be fully informed constantly. We must be vigilant in our ongoing efforts to intervene. We have an inherent responsibility to protect, and we must contribute in every capacity, notably as volunteers at every opportunity. We must extend ourselves, stretch ourselves in every way to assist and reach out to others, particularly those in need. We live and work in the most beautiful capital city, in the best, the cleanest, the safest, and the most beautiful country in the world. I want again to thank all of you city councillors, Mayor Watson, Diane Holmes, for your efforts to keep Ottawa as beautiful, well-functioning, and service-oriented as it is. And I thank you all for this very meaningful recognition you now offer me that allows me to be a better ambassador for our beloved city of Ottawa that I cherish so much. Thank you all very much.
I now ask Councillor Fleury, who has a small announcement to make.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like Councillor Moffat to maybe join me here.
Happy to jump in.
Great. So Councillor Moffat and I are organizing the Municipal Mavericks. It's a team that will take part in a competition called Exile Island. All this for Children's Wish Foundation of Ottawa. This event's happening on June 14th, and we're fundraising for a very special person. He's in the audience with his father. Ryan, if you could stand up. So we're fundraising for Ryan, who has ALL leukemia. His wish is to go to the 2014 IIHF World Junior Championships in Sweden next year. So our team is fundraising, and we'll have a special barbecue on May 17th, Friday, at Ben Franklin Place. So if members of council or city employees have an opportunity to come down, we'll also have a silent auction on May 19th and 30th. All this to make Ryan's wish come true, and he's a resident of Marianne Wilkinson's ward, and hopefully we have other councillors such as Rainer Blois and Diane Deans, who also joined us last year to participate.
So if I could quickly translate that, we would like to have some fundraising for Exile Island. For Ryan, we're trying to raise close to $10,000. We'll have a special barbecue on Friday, May 17th at Ben Franklin Place. And at City Hall, we will have a silent auction on the 29th and 30th of May. Thank you all.
Councillor Moffat?
No, it's, I think Matt said it all.
Great. Well, Ryan, thank you very much for being with us today. I think he deserves a big round of applause for that great effort. So congratulations. I'm also very pleased to recognize in the gallery representatives from the Ovarian Cancer Society. This is the first ever Ovarian Cancer Day worldwide, and the first time we've flown the ovarian cancer flag at Ottawa City Hall. And a number of the folks who are with us are researchers and scientists at the University of Ottawa. And we had the opportunity with Councillor Caudry and Hobbs and Wilkinson to be out raising the flag. And I wanted to welcome them and thank them for bringing awareness to this very serious disease that is, as I understand it, the most difficult to detect of all the cancers. So thank you very much for the good work you're doing and the awareness that you're raising, and welcome to City Council. Thank you. Well, it's a very happy occasion for us all at Ottawa City Council. C'est une occasion très, très spéciale.
Very happy occasion for us here at City Council because our colleague, Mr. Stephen Blais, is back.
Colleague and friend, Councillor Stephen Blais from Cumberland, has returned after his courageous battle and recovery and rehabilitation from a heart attack, I believe, about 4 months ago, Steve. And a number of us have had the opportunity to visit him both at the ICU and then at rehab, and have texted and emailed and communicated. And Steve has been a real trooper, along with Marta and certainly Steve Jr. and your parents and your family and friends, and also your staff who have been working without their leader in the office, but who have had the great support of Councillors Monette and Blois, and we appreciate their efforts as well. And Steve, it's great to see you back in that seat over there. We look forward to your contributions, and I'd like to turn the floor over to the Councillor for Cumberland Ward, Steve Blais. Welcome back. Bienvenue.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues for all the generosity and support and well wishes over the last number of months. And I won't take much time. I just wanted to take this opportunity to recognize my staff, Stephanie, Josh, Luke, and Jason. They held the, I'm going to cry. They held the fort down. They took the calls. They took the emails. They took care of my wife. And anyways, thank you.
Well, welcome back, and I think we can safely remove Councillor Steve Blais away on the regrets column, and we're glad to do that. So, Madam Deputy Clerk, roll call, please.
Conseiller Monette. Present.
Councillor Blois?
Here.
Councillor Harder?
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Present.
Councillor El Shantiri?
Present.
Councillor Caudry?
Present.
Councillor Taylor?
Here.
Councillor Shirelli?
Here.
Councillor Eglai?
Here.
Councillor Deans?
Here.
Councillor Tierney?
Present.
Conseiller Fleury?
See.
Councillor Clark?
Here.
Councillor Holmes?
Here.
Councillor Hobbs?
Here.
Councillor McCrae?
Here.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
Present.
Councillor Hume?
Here.
Councillor Blais?
Present.
Councillor Thompson?
Present.
Councillor Moffat?
Here.
Conseiller Darache?
Here.
Councillor Hubley?
Here.
Mayor Watson?
You see,
Le quorum est 10, Monsieur le maire.
You have quorum.
adoption de procès verbeux pour le 24 avril for the 24th of April. Carried. Declarations of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. Received none. Communications as presented. Regrets. We have no regrets. Motion to introduce reports. Councillors El Shantiri and Holmes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Holmes, that Finance and Economic Development Committee and Governance Renewal Subcommittee Joint Report 3 and Planning Committee Reports 46C and 47B and 48A be received and considered, and that the rule of procedure be suspended to receive and consider Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 32 because of urgency of the item contained in the report, specific reasons set below. Waiver of the rule has been requested for Finance Economic Development Committee Report 32, item 1 of the agenda, due to the timeline that the City of Ottawa is about to start the 2014 budget process, with the recipient of the budget process and timetable report at the June meeting of the Finance Economic Development Committee.
On the motion, carried. Reconsideration, nouveau examen. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On reflection and further research, I would ask with the consent of council to withdraw that motion.
With the consent of council, we allow Councillor Clark to withdraw. Carried. Thank you. Committee reports. Finance and Economic Development Committee Report number 32, le rapport numéro 32 de Comité des finances et de développement économique. Item number 1, 2014 Budget Guideline, directive concernant le budget 2014. Hold by Councillor Shirelli. Item 2, Code of Conduct for Members of Council and Gifts Registry, Code de conduite pour les membres du Conseil des registres des cadeaux. And, Councillor, we have some motions on that. And that's item 3 as well. It goes together. Planning Committee Report number 46C, rapport numéro 26C du Comité de l'Urbanisme, Centertown Community Design Plan and Official Plan Amendment.
Hold, please,
we
Mr.
have,
Mayor.
a number of amendments on that as well. Item number 5, Official Plan Amendment, Barhaven South Landowners Cost Sharing Agreement. Councillor Harder has a technical amendment. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? I believe you have a copy of Councillor Harder's. This has been prepared by staff. Councillor? I think Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor Hume. No, I just wanted to know if anyone had any questions and we could carry it on the technical amendment. Carried. On the report as amended.
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Planning Committee Report number 48, rapport numéro 28 du Comité de l'Urbanisme, Treasurer's Statement on Development Charges, Reserve Funds for 2012. Carried. Item number 7, Zoning 201 and 221 City Place Drive, Zonage 201 et 221 Promenade City Place. Adopté. Carried. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda? L'ordre du jour regroupé. On the bulk consent agenda, it's presented. Carried. And Disposition of items approved by committees under delegated authority. Document 1, carried. Received. Okay, so we'll head back now to item number 1, committee report FEDCO 2014 budget guideline. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I have a question, I have a motion as well. Should I deal with the motion first?
You could table the motion, that'd be helpful.
Okay. So the motion is moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Tierney. Whereas it is not in the drafter's intentions to regulate newspaper, web, Twitter, Facebook, or other new media.
Sorry, we're on the budget guideline now.
Sorry, I'm on the wrong one.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a question. So the question is on budget. The guideline moving to 2% from the approved 2.5 has an impact on all other elements of the budget, obviously. So I'm wondering if the Treasurer could outline for us whether there is, and if so, what it is, the impact on our debt.
Did you hear that, Treasurer?
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor. There is no impact on our debt. You've already approved debt for certain capital works this year and in previous years. The rules that you approved for the debt are that the debt servicing can only increase by 0.25% of a tax increase in any 1 year, except for what we refer to as legacy debt. And in 2014, we actually are not anticipating having a problem with the debt servicing, because the debt servicing we would do, or the debt we would issue this year, is primarily around Lansdowne. And if you'll remember, Lansdowne, the debt servicing is to be paid for from a combination of the reduced costs of running Lansdowne, and also from a portion of the incremental taxes to be received from the development on that site. So at this point in time, we are not anticipating a problem with debt servicing in 2014 stemming from the limitation of less than 2% tax increase.
Yeah, I realize there's no impact on debt servicing because you can't do that without a separate motion anyway. But the question is, how much additional debt will we take on that we would not have taken on had we not passed this? And the second sort of filler on that is whether debt that is retired is getting replaced in order to hit this target.
First of all, we wouldn't anticipate any more debt being taken on as a result of this motion. As you know, we do not fund any operating from debt. It's only for capital works. Right. So we would not be taking on more debt as a result of this. You've already passed a policy with respect to how much debt is to be used on capital works, and you've restricted it for the tax-supported debt. And basically, you've limited it to the debt that is retiring is reissued. It's recycled to fund the new capital works. So your debt servicing, the part that is actually paid for on the tax bill, doesn't change as a result of that. It basically stays the same.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must say I was taken aback to hear about this through the media yesterday, this walk-on motion. I'm not quite sure who to aim this question at, but can someone explain to me the urgency, the need of our making a commitment today to this new target?
Well, it was my motion, so I'm happy to, and I can ask the Treasurer for some supplementary comments. I felt it was important that we get out as quickly as possible to allow our partners, namely those that have quasi-independent boards, the library, public health, and the police, as much lead time as possible so that they can start to prepare for the new reality that we're looking to contain our costs and our tax increase to a figure below or at 2%. A lot has changed in the last 4 years, 3.5 years, since the 2.5% commitment was made. Inflation has gone down, and as a result, I think it's the responsible thing to do for us to alter our fiscal plan to ensure that we're keeping closer pace to the inflation rate. And our colleagues at Health and Library and Police obviously will have to make other adjustments to their draft budget, and I thought it was important that they get that information before the June meeting of FEDCO, which is the meeting that will deal with the timetable and other budget matters that we traditionally deal with. And Madam Treasurer, if you could comment, because you were obviously very helpful in the drafting of the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The urgency comes because we've actually started working towards the 2014 budget. Almost as soon as the ink is dried on the current year's, we start the next year's process. In the June report, not only do we deal with the process and the timetable, we also allocate the tax envelopes to all of the boards and to the city. So people have to know what's their starting position. Right now, we have term of council direction that we were given in 2010 with respect to what the target is. And if you want to change it, you really need to do it before we assign the envelopes, because it's very difficult to get that back once you've gone out there and said you can spend up to 2.5 if you really want them to spend less than that. So that is the reason why we put this forward at this time, so that the June report can reflect these decisions.
Thank you. Well, I certainly do understand the timing in terms of preparing the 2014 budget. I guess the reality is this is more political than anything. The fact that a new target would be adopted would, of course, require our staff and all of the service operators and the various boards to adjust their budgets. My concern is that we adopted a 2.5% target, and I willingly did, along with the rest of Council. And a lot of people in the broader organization that is the city have worked very hard to stick to that budget, even to bring it down. But I don't think that we can just look at the rate of inflation. Politically, it is always attractive as you approach an election to promise zero or something close to zero, but then we end up making up for it later. We end up catching up, and we find ourselves in a position, I was reminded as I tripped over a number of sidewalks yesterday evening and bumped my way down a number of pothole-filled roads this morning, where we have an infrastructure deficit that we're still not caught up with. So we can look at the rate of inflation and say, well, yes, budget increases that are above the rate of inflation seem odd, but what about that other deficit that we have to find a way to catch up with? Or are we telling the citizens of Ottawa, we're never going to catch up with that? You know, those potholes and those roads will steadily deteriorate. And that's the position I think that we find ourselves in, and a number of our agencies that serve the most vulnerable. So while it's not at all my desire to become a free spender, and I will always look to try to rein in our spending, I just don't see the need today for us to adopt a new target that's lower than the one we adopted for this term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chernachenko. Councillor El Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I personally, or as a councillor, we understand the cost of living and where we are. Actually, the cost of living below 1% now. So really, I don't think it's fair to compare to the cost of living. But what I'd like to draw your attention, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is a recommendation to the boards to adopt, but as you are a member of the Ottawa Police Board and you yourself voted for the 4 years from 2010 to adopt the budget at 2.5%, and we give that direction to the police, and they are working with that framework. And today, we have different direction to say work with less than 2%. At the same time, when arbitration in the province has no regard to what you think, what you decide to do, and how much tax you collect. And that same arbitration just reward our staff for 2011 and 2012 arbitrated higher than what we even budgeted ourselves, 2.5%. He awarded them at 3%. And so when you have no control over arbitration, I'd like to know, like, why is the demand on us to control our budget, but we sit silent on arbitration who has no recourse what you say or what you do, even as a mayor of a city? Why don't we stand up and talk to the Premier who's going to visit Ottawa this week and other party and put a little bit of pressure on that arbitration is running out of control? And I understand our staff is gonna do their best to meet our goal or our target as a board or as a council, but eventually somebody has to pay the price. The service is going to be reduced because we can't keep finding efficiency. Efficiency, we've been targeted in the last 3-4 years, efficiency. But then we work so hard to find a couple of $100,000, but then arbitration with one stroke of a pen, he cost me $1.8 million, and nobody seems in the whole city talk about it.
Well, we certainly appreciate the work that you've done, Councillor El Shantiri, as Chair of the Police Services Board with the Provincial Association. I, too, have raised it with the political leaders of all three political parties, as well as ministers, and this is one of the challenges that we're all facing, that I don't believe, because we've not been successful at arbitration, we have to simply say, all right, well, we'll just continue with above inflation increases. I think we have an obligation to continue to put pressure on the provincial government, and for once and for all, encourage them to understand that when the clause says take into account one community's ability to pay, they actually take into account our ability to pay and not our ability to simply do the easy thing and go back and raise taxes to make up for their arbitrated settlement. So you bring up a very good point, and it's one of the dilemmas that we all face with arbitrated settlements that are, in the case of the police, running 3 times the rate of inflation. It's not sustainable. Councillor Darash, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be supporting the committee recommendation. I think it is the right and prudent step to take. We need to give the administration and the agencies as much notice and as much time as possible so that we can make intelligent and thoughtful decisions. I can tell you, Mayor, I sat at this table, not with some pride, and seen situations where we're making decisions on reducing the budget at the council table, and that is messy, it is grisly, it is difficult, and often we did not make the right decisions because we did not have the lead time to do the analysis, to put the thoughtful thinking into where we should reduce to make sure that we're meeting the needs of residents. So I think we should be giving them as much time as possible to come up with thoughtful either policy or operational impacts so that we're not doing it too late and in a manner where we bring forward reductions that are not in keeping with the expectations of the community. I wanted to ask the Treasurer about the conservation, for example, the other agencies that fall within the portfolio of the City of Ottawa or are a part of our tax bill. So, for example, the conservation authorities, I appreciate that they're independent, appreciate that there is a process in which the levy is determined, but I do think if we are going to be sending signals to our administration that we should be looking at some of the other organizations that are part of our portfolio that make up the tax bill. So would this include them, or would we be sending some strong messaging that they need to be consistent in the kind of spending that we're going to be showing here at City Hall?
Mr. Mayor, the conservation authorities are, you basically have to accept almost all of their budget and request, and there's only a portion that really is within your control. We will be advising the boards and commissions and agencies that you are directly responsible for and can control. We can send a letter to the conservation authorities telling them that we've set the target to be less than 2%, but ultimately you really don't have a lot of control over them. I think it's incumbent on the members of council who sit on those boards to try to influence that at the board table as opposed to trying to get the City of Ottawa to try to force that on them.
Yeah, no, and I accept that answer, but I do think it is worth, as you suggest, communicating to them. We do have representatives that were appointed by this council that should be, I think, paying very close attention to the actions that we're taking here, and I think it would be helpful to have that kind of communication to them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and perhaps what we might do, Mr. Kirkpatrick, is meet with the representatives of the board so that we can develop a bit of a strategy, because their budgets have come in consistently above even our 2.5%, if I'm not mistaken, in the last couple of budgets. It's not a large amount, but it's the principle of they too should be showing some constraint.
We'll arrange for that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Blois, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I certainly see this as a positive step in going in the right direction and more in line with the rate of inflation. I am a little surprised by the urgency, but I accept the argument that more lead time is better for staff and boards, etc. A question to the Treasurer, though. Councillor Chiarelli asked about what this does to our debt load, and I guess on the flip side, I'm concerned in terms of our contributions to our capital plan. We've laid out the long-term financial plan. We have in our capital program, we have a number of projects that have been delayed over the years. And how is this going to affect our contributions, and what is it going to do to some of the projects that are pending in the next year?
This motion actually will not affect the contribution to capital or the plan that you agreed to when we tabled or you adopted the long-range financial plan in 2012. So at that time you agreed that we need to increase that contribution not only by inflation and for growth, but also there was a portion for catch-up for increases that hadn't happened in prior years. That plan is still in place, and we will work with that within the less than 2%. So I do not expect that will change as a result of this direction at all.
But you're also, I think you're forecasting, and I don't have it in front of me right now, that in future years that we're going to need to increase our contributions to our capital plan. And I think it was starting in 2014, 2015, I believe. By doing this now, does that not run counter to what you're suggesting we need to do down the road?
What the plan was is that in 2015 we would come back if there was not at that point in time an ongoing stable source of funding from the federal and provincial governments to augment our capital requirements. But for 2014, we had just agreed that there was going to be another bump up in the contribution to capital to make up for previous years when it wasn't increased. So really the decision point, the inflection point will be in 2015 when we come back and say what has happened with respect to an ongoing program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Blois. Conseiller Monette, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. The question that I have, basically, if we pass this motion, this is more or less a guideline for staff, right? I mean, there's nothing set in stone. There will be public consultation, as we always do. The public will have a chance to say if they agree at the end of the day what's brought forward. Is this a correct assumption I'm reading?
That is correct, Councillor.
Okay. So I don't have any issues with this, Mr. Mayor. I think it's the rate of inflation is 2%, cost of living. I think it's the motion, all it says is to try and work towards getting 2% this time around. With public consultation, we will know from the public if there is any issues with it at the end of the day when the budget is tabled. Last year, we came in at 2.9%. And if you remember at that time, I think the majority of the comments from the public was that they were very satisfied at 2.9%. So could we lower it another 0.9? I believe we can, and I believe that we have just as good a budget as last year. In fact, I think as we move forward, our goal should always be to reduce the tax increase as much as possible. 2%, if this is a goal this time around, that's great. We should even try to be below 2%, if we're able to. At the end of the day, let's have all the departments look at their budgets, and let's see what we have at the end of the day, and we will see what has to be cut off or taken off to achieve 2%. If, like I say, if we were able to do it 2.9% last year, I'm sure we can do 2% this year. In fact, I'm sure we can do even better if we try. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. It was 2.09%. Councillor Chiarelli was itching to get to that too, as was I, but thank you for those comments. Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question, I guess, I'm not sure, maybe for the clerk's office. I'm just looking at the whereases. And the whereas it indicates, whereas Council established a term of Council budget guideline in 2010 that limited any tax increase to no more than 2.5%. In light of that direction, which we've already given, I guess my question is, procedurally, is this motion necessary? Because something under 2 would be under 2.5. So I'm wondering whether, I understand the option of giving notice to people in advance, but do you actually require this to bring in a budget that's less than 2%?
Mr. Mayor, the way I would look at it procedurally is it provides increased clarity for staff to develop those processes and for the June report.
Okay, but from a functional point of view, with the existing direction, could staff have not come to us with a budget of less than 2%? I mean, I'm all for lower taxes. Don't get me wrong here. I'm just wondering if we're adding paper or we don't necessarily need paper.
Councillor, since it was my motion, I worked with the city treasurer. The fallback position, the automatic position, was that each department and agency would be budgeting for 2.5% as a given. This, as the clerk has indicated, was important that we send a signal clear and concise as soon as possible that they would not be getting a 2.5, would be closer to 2. So it was an opportunity for council to give direction to staff. Don't count on the 2.5. You're going to have to count on 0.5 less this year as they prepare their budgets and submit them to us. So that was the rationale.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you. Okay. Green, I think, would say go. Here it says red, so I stopped. You know, this discussion brings me into the magic number realm. Pick a number. Why pick it now? Well, because we want people to know what it is, not necessarily because of the immense political benefit, which is not that immense. 0.09%, I think, was pointed out recently. But the relevance of the cost of living can be used as an argument for bringing it down, but we also every year fold in the growth during the year it's taking place, which means we do have some play in the actual ups and downs between the departments, which I think, for example, for police, I think that we put some pressure on them. They came through. Whether we put more pressure on them they come through or not, I think that's up to Eli and the police board to try to determine. Interest rates continue to be favorable, so our debt situation, which somebody raised, we're probably going to borrow more money at lower rates, and the total payment is the same, which is what we've been doing for the last 3 years, probably for longer than that. We also have the specter of senior governments contributing to infrastructure. That's a specter because they say they're going to, but we haven't seen the money yet. And I think that this issue of whether we needed to tell them now or not is probably the only issue. And whether somebody from the Green Party today said he wanted to see public consultation on it. Well, we never have consulted on it. We've consulted on pieces of the budget as they come along, and when the package is put together after all the committee hearings not, we bring it to council as a total picture. And there's plenty of opportunity for consultation at that. What we're doing here is trying to pick the magic number, and we're good at it. All I can say is I think that the chairman of the police board is going to have a serious job to do to try to see what can be done. Chairman of CSPC has to deal with what we always had to deal with, is more is better than less. And less is what they're going to get. And that's a question of explaining the rules. We didn't freeze any of these things. We're talking about a slight increase. You know, I don't really think you want to paint bad guys into this picture, especially the one sitting at the head of the table who's taking it on because he felt it was necessary to paint a picture. So I think we needed to understand why there was no debate about this at the committee, because frankly, the committee agrees with it. If you agree with something, you don't start debating it. Yet here we are today saying, well, you know, this surprise mood, this walk-on motion, this, that. Well, despite those peripheral concerns, the reality is the place is going to run next year, and it's going to run well.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Are there other comments? Just a couple of observations on this. You know, we often have to remind ourselves what we've been able to accomplish in the last 3 years. We've brought what I consider very much a balanced approach to the budgeting. We haven't gone too far to the right by promising to freeze taxes or cut taxes, because we understand that that comes with a price. And on the other side, we haven't gone on a spending spree that is not sustainable by the tax revenue that we bring in. We've invested in basic infrastructure through Ottawa on the Move, and that's a project that continues. Our single largest investment in infrastructure is our light rail project. And we've also managed to reduce the transit fare increases by 60%. We've frozen recreation fees. The increase is not as high on the water and sewer bills. And what we're looking at doing is reducing the tax target by 0.5%, which I think is very reasonable given the fact that inflation is running under 2%. I think we are all collectively up for the challenge to ensure that we are not overtaxing and that we actually bring that balance to the table, the balance between providing good public services that our communities have come to expect and at the same time doing it in a prudent and fiscally responsible fashion. A lot has changed since we all agreed to the 2.5% figure. The inflation rate has gone down significantly over the last couple of years. But as you all know, we have some extenuating circumstances that inflation pays no heed to. Gasoline prices comes to mind as the great example. Unlike the average homeowner who may have an option of carpooling or walking to work or cycling or taking the bus, we have to buy gas for vehicles that operate 24/7. Buses, snowplows, ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars. And that adds to the burden of our costs. So when some have said, well, why don't you just bring it down to the rate of inflation, I respond politely by saying that the fact is that we do have some inflationary costs that we can't control and that we have to continue to have those vehicles in the fleet carried on. So I think Council can send a very significant message to our partners that we're all in this together. I know it's going to be difficult because of arbitrated settlements and some costs that are often beyond our control, but I don't think that's a reason for us to wave the white flag. I think we have to get out there and do our best to ensure that those partners have as much lead time as possible to prepare their draft budgets. Now, the argument is always, when people lose the argument on substance, they rush to process. Well, we weren't elected to constantly harangue process issues. We're elected to make substantive decisions. And there will be plenty of opportunity for the public to have input on substance, not process. And the substance in this case is the budget. There will be opportunities when the budget guidelines and timetable are set in February or in June at FEDCO. And then there will be ample opportunity as ward councillors have ward-specific meetings on their budget, as we have our traditional citywide public consultation meetings, and as every single standing committee of the city also has an opportunity to address the budget, as will all of our new advisory committees. So I estimate there are probably a couple dozen opportunities over the course between June and the passage of the budget at the end of November for us to engage the public, in addition to all of your encounters with community associations, your one-on-one meetings, people stopping you on the street. There's lots of opportunity. I was on the bus today. Someone was giving me some advice on where we could save money. And I think we all have those experiences where there's lots of opportunity to get into the substance as opposed to constantly harking back, well, the process is flawed. I don't agree that the process is flawed. I think the process is we as leaders have to make a decision on what we think is a reasonable tax rate to go to the people on. And we're going to do that, I hope, today with your support. And then we go and we draft the budget based on that guideline and subsequently bring that draft budget out to the public for their input and their feedback. So I look forward to working with our other partners, the library, the public health unit, our conservation authorities, the police services board, as well as, of course, all of our departments under the leadership of Mr. Kirkpatrick. So on the motion as presented, carried. Dissent by Councillor Chernyshenko. Thank you. Next item is Code of Conduct for Members of Council and Gift Registry, Code de conduite pour les membres du Conseil enregistré des cadeaux. Items 2 and 3, Clerk's Office advises me, should be dealt with together. We have 2 motions that I'm aware of, and I'll ask that Councillor, is Councillor DeRush here, who has a motion as well. We'll start then with Councillor Shirelli has a motion. If you'd like to introduce, and anyone else has a motion, if they could please bring it forward at this point, and we'll put those on the record. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This comes out of the committee meeting where a couple of us asked questions regarding the communications advertising outside the ward. We were given answer as to the intent of that guideline. So this actually just rewords the provision to reflect that intent. It says, whereas it was not the drafter's intent to regulate newspaper ad, web, Twitter, Facebook, or other new media, general mass media advertising, be it resolved that the section of the proposed expense policy entitled Communications and Advertising Outside the Ward be amended to read, direct mail and direct marketing expenses for a geographic area outside of a member's ward will not be permitted without the prior approval of the city clerk and solicitor or the deputy clerk in consultation with the integrity commissioner. Notwithstanding, it is recognized that advertising in mass media and broader circulation publications and some unaddressed postal walks will cross ward boundaries, and these are exempt where outside the control of the member seeking to direct mail market to his or her ward residents. So that's that. If we could deal with that, then I have another question.
Okay. Do you have any other motions?
No.
Okay. So we'll just get the motions on the table now. Councillor DeRush, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion flows from some questions I had at committee. In our current practice here at the city is that we do not interfere with quasi-judicial bodies. I think it's Political Science 101 that the judiciary is independent of the legislature and the executive. So I think we have to put in black and white in our code that we do not, as councillors, intervene in any quasi-judicial administrative manner. And the second is we often, as councillors, get calls regarding parking tickets or other infractions that have been issued by one of our enforcement wings at the city, and it is a common practice that we, certainly in my office, say we are not allowed or authorized to intervene in a parking ticket, that they do need to take it to court or to consult with our bylaw services. So I think we need it in black and white, Mr. Mayor, these two codes as part of our code of conduct. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other motions that people would like to bring forward? We have the clerk, the deputy clerk, and the integrity commissioner here to answer questions. Is this a motion or a question, Councillor Shirelli? We could put Councillor.
Okay, thank you. It will be a motion if direction isn't sufficient.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is in relation to the cap. So as somebody who is nowhere near the cap, I'm just hearing people question as to when or how it would come into effect. So I'm wondering, do I need a motion, or can we simply give direction to have the introduction of the limits on the cap be prorated beginning July 1st? Because there are a number of ways to deal with that. So if my intention is to have it prorated, do I move a motion, or is direction good enough?
Mr. Mayor, we take a direction, and we're just conversing to be absolutely clear. If I understood the councillor, if you're looking for a prorated on the estimated $8,500
right.
at 3.5%, so what I would understand is from July 1st to December 31st, then each member of council in their constituency budget would be limited to approximately $4,250. That's 50% of what the approximate 8,500 is.
4,250, unless they haven't, unless by putting that in they still don't reach the annual cap.
Mayor, if what the member is suggesting that for those members of council who have already achieved towards the cap a significant portion, so say if they're already maybe more than 50% towards their annual cap, that be prorated, because otherwise it actually limits those members of council who traditionally spend in the fall and winter below what others do, because each of your spending patterns varies in terms of donations based on your individual community. So I would be concerned that members of council who traditionally have donations more in the fall and winter, that they would be penalized. So if we could get a little bit more clarity, for example, if the direction is if a member is already over 50% towards their donation cap by July 1st, that it be prorated, that
And they still get 50.
that they would get.
Yeah.
If we could do that, that might be simpler for us.
Okay, that would be the direction I would want, because there are a number of members who've done some pretty methodical planning for the year, and to have it suddenly change might cause disruption in the community among people who are relying on it. Is that okay as direction, or do I need a motion?
Well, I'm not clear as to what's happening. My understanding is the vast majority of members of council are below the 3.5% cap. There's about 5 members who are traditionally above the 5%. Do we have any figures as to where people stand now that, is this even necessary, or can we just begin it July 1st as was originally intended?
Well, Mr. Mayor, no matter what, you have to begin it one way or the other. So I'm just saying this is the way
I realize that, but there were some people said, well, let's move it to January 1st. And I'm saying, no, we're going to start sometime, and this gives us enough lead time. So, Madam Deputy.
Mr. Mayor, I have 2 members of council that are currently over the 50%. The overwhelming majority are well under $1,000, and I have 7 who are between $1,000 and $2,800.
So no one is over the full 100% of $8,500 at this stage. So I'm not sure if it's a problem. I think most, even those who are at 50%, were at about 40% of the year through, and they're just at 50%.
But the thing is, Mr. Mayor, you have to choose one of the regimes, because it doesn't automatically default to any particular one.
All right,
so
but
I'm just saying.
I guess what we need from you is clarity in terms of a motion. What are you proposing? Okay. So if you want to give that some thought, and we'll come back to you. Okay. And you might want to just consult with the clerk and the Integrity Commissioner on the drafting of that. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you.
And we're dealing, just Councillor Deans reminded me, it's both items 2 and 3 together. So if you have questions on either, this would be the occasion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for not being available to attend the committee meeting last week, and so I'm seeking clarity on item number 3, which is the council expense policy and community fundraising and special events policy. There was a committee recommendation that was amended to say, in an election year, a member of council must not seek donations and sponsorships for any event that has not been staged in the previous 2 years, nor accept donations or stage any new event supported by donations and sponsorships after he or she has filed nomination papers for election to any office in the City of Ottawa. I just wanted to seek some clarity around that, because there are, I understand the distinction, I understand the purpose of what you're trying to achieve, but and I understand that if an event like the annual seniors tea, that would be exempt, because that's part of the member of council's duty as a member of council. But one of our other duties as a member of council is to open the little parks and parkettes and water spray facilities and all of those things in our wards. And normally those events are run very low budget, but run with sponsorships from the local pizzeria or the local corner store that gives water bottles or what have you for those events. And that to me is very much a line of duty of what the members of council do, whether it's an election year or not. That work of the city goes on. So Mr. Marlowe, my question to you is, how would you interpret this, and would you see that those park events that we do, the park openings and the new facility openings in our wards, would be exempt from this recommendation?
Mr. Mayor, in answer to that question, the simple answer is yes, it would be exempt. It would seem to me that official park openings are planned well in advance as well. They may occur in a blackout period, but they're usually planned well in advance. They're partly city organized. So these are municipal functions. They fall within the official responsibility of a councillor to participate. The kinds of sponsorships and donations that the councillor is talking about are minor. They're pizzas, they're water bottles, as you say, or otherwise. So they would be exempt. I would advise councillors, as much as possible in an election year, to consult with the deputy clerk and myself well in advance of these, just to avoid any kinds of issues that might arise and manage the perception of some of these events occurring during the close election period. But the councillor is quite right. Those kinds of events would be exempt.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Deans. Councillor Tierney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I had a lot of questions last time, and this time I'll just keep this very short. This is more about the protocol side of things versus our office budgets. We have a parade in the east end of the city, the Parade of Lights. Traditionally, this parade float for the firefighters has been funded through protocol until last year. It was the first time for this parade of over 100,000 people that the 4 East End councillors plus the chair of CPS had to chip in to be able to fund this float. I expect that's going to be a regional pressure on us, and it could get quite big. So I guess this might not be for you, Bob. It might be more about the protocol. I think that makes perfect sense. That's a protocol expense. But who deems what goes into protocol and what doesn't? Because I really see that as an issue this year if we have to fund, it could be upwards of $500 out of our office budgets for this.
Mr. Mayor, I think what would be best is, and I appreciate the member's question, we go back and look at that. I'll deal with the chief protocol official, and we can come back and provide a more fulsome answer during the budget period.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Mr. O'Connor. But that's great. But I'm wondering who currently has access to that protocol budget. Is it something that we can actually suggest? Look, with members of council, is a parade of 100,000 people make sense for something to be paid out of the protocol budget, or is this something that it's its own independent office and they get their decisions on that?
No, Mr. Mayor, it's an office that reports directly to me, and council from time to time does give us direction with regards to where the funds should be spent.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question, and I'm referring back to the FEDCO meeting, and I asked a question, specific one, in regard to municipalities that are outside the city of Ottawa. And I specifically asked about Marionville and the ability to support that organization. That village is part of Russell Township, North Dundas, City of Ottawa, Osgood Ward. And they have, prior to amalgamation, the former Township of Osgood did contribute $1,000, $2,000 a year because our residents went over and used their community center and their outdoor arena. Following amalgamation, that contribution from the west side of the road stopped. And I firmly believe that we should be doing that. I've contributed out of my office budget towards events that are on that side of the road to the Township of Russell. At the FEDCO meeting, I asked about this, and I raised it with the Deputy City Manager, Kanalakis. He said there are no provisions. At that meeting, I thought I was assured that there were provisions, because in some fashion, I will continue to support that situation. There is another one on the same road, Marvelville Community Association. Their building is on the Russell side, but 90% of the people who use that community hall live on the Osgood side, so I think, Ottawa side, and I think there is, that we have an obligation to support those. So I would like to get that clarified here today.
My understanding was, Councillor, that staff were going to come back and look at that because it's a unique situation, I understand. So, is Mr. Chenier, were you aware of that inquiry at the last FEDCO meeting?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we were aware of the inquiry, and I think in the past staff have looked at this, and even though initial review of the formal granting program didn't find a direct way to fund Russell Township for in order for them to fund the association, we did commit to go and look at whether there are other ways to work with that community in order to make something happen that would be positive for everyone. So we will take that away and figure out a solution that works.
It might be something, Councillor, that as opposed to giving a grant to an outside municipality, that the community association on your side of the border be given some purchase of service for X percent of the operation of the rink, so that the money is being given to a local Ottawa group as opposed to the Township of Russell.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. And it is a very unique situation. I will await Mr. Senier's response to that. But the Community Association for Marionville is made up of representatives from the 3 municipalities. I sit on that. So, in fact, the contribution goes to the Marionville Community Association, which is part of 3 different municipalities. So it is a bit of an awkward situation. I guess I will have faith in the staff that we will be able to work out some type of procedure for the city to donate so that I don't have to donate out of my office budget. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thompson. Conseil Monette, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Mayor, just following up on Councillor Tierney's comment about Parade of Lights. As you know, I mean, Parade of Lights, it's quite a large amount that they asked me, as protocol was not doing it, so the councillors decided to do it. In the new scenario, and I just want some clarification there, when we sponsor Parade of Lights, they do put in their newsletter or whatever, that councillors have supported it. Does this go under the advertising budget in the future?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, if the councillor could repeat his question. I was writing the motion, sorry.
Okay, I'll repeat it again. I'm following up on Councillor Tierney's comments. And in the future, please let me know if people are not listening. As we move forward, we supported the Parade of Lights for quite a substantial amount. It was through our office budget, and through the Parade of Lights, what it was they put it in their flyers or advertising that we have supported the Parade of Lights. Now, just for clarity for everybody around the table, when it's an event like that, and they do recognize it in the newsletter or whatever, is that considered under advertising, or is it considered under a different form?
Mr. Mayor, if I understand the councillor correctly, if their contribution is for the advertising and the promotion, in other words, that's what they're purchasing and to the group, yes, that's advertising and not subject to the cap.
Okay, so they asked us for help. We pay. I mean, let's use the Canada Day as an example at Petrie Island, which draws 25,000 people. I know Councillor Bose, myself, I'm sure some of the other councillors would have supported it also. At Canada Day, it's a sponsorship package, but part of the package is that you are recognized for your donation to the event. Is that considered advertising also?
If that's part of the sponsorship program, we would have to see these things, Councillor, and we would assist you in interpreting the individual events as they come forward. But as you describe it, that sounds like advertising.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Merci, conseiller. Councillor DeRush, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two questions that a colleague, Councillor Shirley, asked me about the motion that I'm moving with Councillor El Shantiri. This would include the Committee of Adjustment. So this is to Mr. O'Connor. This would include the Committee of Adjustment, the way it's worded. So this means a letter. This means participating directly in the Committee of Adjustment, which is a quasi-judicial body, which is meant to operate at arm's length in an independent fashion from Council.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's my understanding.
And the second question is with respect to a licensing body such as the LCBO, where our input is actually sought into their decision-making process. So would we need to tinker with our wording? That is one where, again, we are consulted by the licensing body and ACGO as well. So how would we need to tinker with this, Mr. O'Connor, to make it clear that those bodies that seek our input as part of their process would still be acceptable?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe anything needs to be changed in the draft motion at this point in time. We would look at that as business as usual for the City Council.
Okay, that's important clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Caudry, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And just one very, very small question in terms of events. Councilman had mentioned Canada Day. In certain of those events through the SEAT program, we're obligated to, go out and bring barriers and, some furniture. Up until now, some of the departments have been covering that cost. Now that cost comes back to our budget because we'll have to go out and rent barriers and chairs and that kind of stuff. How is that going to work in terms of the expense account for the office? Is that a brand new cost to the office, and or the department will still be covering those kind of expenses?
Mr. Mayor, the in-kind sort of sponsorship arrangement we have with Parks and Recreation, that carries on. Any overage that the councillor's office's budgets beyond that credit that you guys, each of you gets, and that's currently, and there's no change in this, is funded under the community events envelope because it's a partnership between you and your community association for those things, especially when we're working with city staff within your credits as we do now.
Okay, and that credit's still remaining at the dollar value that it is presently and not changing?
There is no change to the credit, and Mr. Chenier and I have had that discussion.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Caudry. Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this at all. I was happy that with the work that's been done so far, but I need to speak with regard to what Councillor DeRoche just added to what he was talking about. I look at his initial motion and I'm thinking, well, that's doing us pretty much all a favor, because how many times do we get asked by people who get a ticket from bylaw for parking on the street and they think that the City of Ottawa has somehow all of a sudden come up with a 3-hour plan between 7 and 7, and so they have expectations that there's something that we can do. So I think that clarifies that, and I like that. But I think that when you just came back, Councillor DeRoche, and talked about committee of adjustment, I am sure that someone like Councillor Hobbs would have a great deal of difficulty in her ward. I look to the number of committee of adjustment files that go through from your ward councillor. And like planning committee, with planning committee, for example, think about the committee of adjustment, and these applications are small planning committee applications. And yet the planning committee, we are there to help and to guide and support the residents that are near neighbors involved in the process, whether they're the applicants or whatever, but we are there for that kind of support. I know Councillor Holmes is going to be moving an omnibus motion shortly with Councillor Hume, doing her job for the people she represents. So I think that the Committee of Adjustment, I would not want to see my hands tied, or particularly the councillors in the more older urban areas that have a real preponderance of these kinds of applications that do go through that process. I see that while it's a smaller process, it still is a planning process, and the community looks for our support. So I'm not sure why we would lump that into it. I guess City Solicitor.
Well, Madam Chair, as I understood, the mover of the motion was looking to capture the quasi-judicial nature of those types of committees, so I do believe that he did want to include the Committee of Adjustment and similar sort of adjudicative tribunals and quasi-judicial matters. So,
what about the Court of Revision? What about the OMB?
In the Court of Revision, members of council make up that, whereas at the OMB, of course, you do not make up, or you do not.
But we don't make up the Committee of Adjustment, so there are.
But you do appoint the members, Mr.
But it is quasi-judicial, the Court of Revision.
Correct.
So, I mean, I'm just saying that I think that the essence of this is good, but I don't think that our hands should be tied if we need to help one of our residents or businesses with an application that is minor enough that it can go through the process of the Committee of Adjustment. And if you're saying that it has to, then I'm going to ask that you isolate that, because I'm voting against that.
Okay.
And I think that others, if you think about it, it will be, you know, it's not going to be that big a problem, Mr. Mayor, for people in the suburbs, because we don't have a lot of that, although as in the older parts of our community, we have people that are putting in a severance, or it's a granny suite, or different things like that. But for many of the other councillors around this table, there's a lot of that, and that they're the people that vote for them expect them to help them with. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hobbs, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to that, I don't generally interfere in anything with the Committee of Adjustment. However, I do advise residents that are looking for support, as Councillor Harder has indicated, that are coming in and talking about infill and what issues they might have and how to deal with Committee of Adjustment, and give them advice on, just lots of different things. Is that okay if we pass a motion like this? Or is it simply, my appearance at the Committee of Adjustment that's an issue?
It would be the latter would be the issue. The former would be business as usual, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hobbs. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a problem with this. It says not attempt to influence or interfere directly or indirectly, financially or other with a decision of city employees. That would mean the planning department. That means I can't make a recommendation for a change in the conditions of a subdivision or building that's coming up, because I would then be influencing them by saying they should make a change. That's what it says.
With respect, Mr. Mayor, that wouldn't be the interpretation. This is with regards to quasi-judicial tribunals that are arm's length of the city, not with regards to planning committee, for example.
That's not what it says. I'm reading the first paragraph, and read it. It says not attempt to influence or interfere either directly or indirectly, financially, politically, or otherwise with the decisions of city employees. That's any city employee. That includes the planning department. And I frequently make what I call suggestions, but that is influencing their decisions if they accept those suggestions. And if I can't do that, I'm not doing my job at all, because in planning things, it's really important. And the same thing with the Committee of Adjustment. If I don't like what the Committee of Adjustment does, you're saying to me, I can't even appeal it to the OMB. I can't do anything to change a decision that might be made. It's not... Once the decision is being made, I don't have as much of a problem with it, but if you're influencing the making of it, and that's what I read into this, that I think you are actually taking us and saying you cannot do your job, you cannot stand up for your residents, you cannot suggest the changes to anything. What am I supposed to do, get a resident to make the change, suggest the change because I can't do it, which I'm going to have to do under the financing thing? I think it's nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson has already spoken, so... It's all right. Councillor DeRush.
This would be wrap-up, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I can recall some 20 years ago in my first political science course at the University of Ottawa that there needs to be a separation between the legislature and the executive and the judiciary. And there is a long graveyard of politicians who have called judges, who have intervened in the judicial process, and suffer the consequences. So we in the province have set up these bodies as independent quasi-judicial bodies that are to be free of any political influence. I don't think anyone is suggesting that you cannot meet with a constituent and offer them some advice and guidance, but to participate directly in the process, either by writing a letter or attending and speaking on their behalf, I think is political influence on a quasi-judicial body that is, I think, should be prohibited, and I think is a best practice across the province. I know a number of councillors already do this. They do not participate directly in the tribunals, and again, I don't see this as being anything that is not consistent with some of the best practices in the province, and I think political science 101 that you do not interfere with the judiciary. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Eglai.
I'd like to hear the answer to the question that Councillor Wilkinson posed to the clerk about city employees who are not sitting on any boards before we vote on this. I think it's critical that we hear that answer because it can make a huge difference as to whether this motion is supported or not.
Mr. Mayor, the way that we would look at this is reading not only this paragraph in conjunction with the following paragraph, which provides some examples, but reading the end of the sentence of the first paragraph, which talks about those individuals charged with making decisions as part of an independent arm's-length process, which I think takes it out of the realm of dealing with planning staff on matters before Planning Committee.
I think that clarifies it. Okay, so we have 3 motions. Are there any other motions? Councillor Taylor, a motion?
Sorry, no. Well, on the motion, just to clarify, I'm going to leave planning for a moment. I'm going to go to License Appeals Committee. With respect to members of council speaking with city employees in the bylaw department with respect to items coming to License Appeals Committee, how would that be handled?
Mr. Mayor, that would no longer that would be prohibited under this amendment.
So just to clarify, if there's a case being brought before License Appeals Committee or License Appeals Tribunal as a charge from bylaw, then councillors who may have been involved with bylaw to incent the making of that charge, and I'm thinking specifically of our ongoing bandit taxi issue and bandit limousines, we can't liaise with or we can't work with the bylaw department in terms of moving those things forward then.
That would be my interpretation, Mr. Mayor.
Colleagues, I have a suggestion. This is, we've had a number of concerns raised about this. I appreciate where Councillor DeRush and Councillor El-Shantiri are going with it in terms of keeping an arm's length relationship, but there are a number of examples that were being brought up. I think we need this to go back to committee and have a staff report on what we, I think what we want to try to get at are those quasi-judicial bodies where we shouldn't be interfering versus those issues as constituency matters we should be engaging in. So I'm prepared to move this back to committee for a full report by the city clerk, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. People agree to refer it because I think the intent is correct, but I think we've got so many of these different agencies and groups, and I had some difficulty with the word city employees as opposed to the ones that are just adjudicating. So on referral to FEDCO, carried. Okay. Councillor Blois, I believe you've spoken already on this item. You had your turn.
I did?
Yeah.
Which week?
What's that?
Which week? I haven't spoken.
Have you not spoken? I apologize. Then the floor is yours.
If it's deferred, that serves my purpose. But I was going to say that motion, there's obviously a wording issue in that motion. And with all due respect to those who took Poli-Sci 101 at Carleton, that motion does not work. And I think, as you've indicated, it does need to be sent back to staff to be rewritten. So.
It was actually Ottawa U, I think, you did that degree.
Well, and I guess that really explains it, Mr. Mayor. That really explains it as to why you and I would see this the same way. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we have Councillor Shirelli has now got a draft motion from staff. If you'd like to introduce that, Councillor, seconded by Councillor Eglai. And then we have the original Shirelli and Tierney motions, and those are the only ones I have. So
All right.
Councillor Shirelli, please.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. Well, you had to choose one regime or another to bring it into force. So it's be resolved that for 2013, where a member of council has expended more than 50% of the value of the 3.5% cap on July 1st, 2013, they be permitted to expend up to 50% of the value of the annual cap. So that's prorated for the remainder of the year.
Okay, so we have the first motion by Councillor Shirelli and Tierney dealing with communications and advertising outside the ward. Carried. The second motion by Councillor Shirelli and Eglai that you just heard. Carried. On items 2 and 3 as amended. Carried. Thank you all very much. Item number 4 is the Centretown Community Design Plan and Official Plan Amendment. Councillor Holmes has 3 motions, and I'd ask that she introduce them one at a time. This is a somewhat complicated issue, so if you can introduce each one at a time and speak to it, and then we'll open for questions. So there's 3, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to start by saying that this has been a 3.5-year process. I want to thank the staff who've gone through those 3.5 years with many public meetings, many consultations with the public and the development community and the community association. It has been a long process. It's been a good process. There's been lots of public engagement. So I want to thank the staff and thank George Dark for his vision that he brought forward for this part of town. We have the ideas of more parkland, greening our streets, looking after our heritage buildings, with designated areas in this Centretown area. There's a high-rise area in the north end, another high-rise area along Catherine Street. There are the 2 low-rise areas designated, the Golden Triangle in the east and the area west of Kent in the west, and then the middle area that is now going to be a mid-rise. It's gone from 4 stories to 9 stories in that mid-rise area. So there has been general agreement come forward, but towards the end of the process, the Community Association and the development community got together, very interesting process to go through, and they came forward with some joint recommendations. So this is an area that's going to have 10,000 more people, and we need more park space. We need some community benefits that will be necessary for people moving into this area when we up the number of people who will live here. So as a result of the agreement structured between the Community Association and the developers, we have a couple of motions. They came to Planning Committee, and Planning Committee referred all that public comment that came into Planning Committee to the staff. And as a result, we have some motions here before us from the staff. One is, if you're looking at your order of consideration, it is Annex C. It's an omnibus motion from staff as they responded to the many recommendations that were sent from Planning Committee. And so this motion, Annex C, creates some clearer definitions of processes, some clearer definitions of areas, talks about heritage and how we need to protect our heritage, and the Centretown Heritage study that will be done. It talks about built form and sets out the guidelines for the built form, whether that is the mid-rise or the high-rise. It talks about landmark buildings, which is a new concept to come forward to allow landmark buildings in that mid-rise area up to 27 stories with very strict criteria. So they will have to be on 3 streets. They will have to have a public park as incorporated. So it's a very interesting new concept, and with very strict guidelines so people in the area know exactly what's happening. And then changing some of the minor height matters along Cartier, Gladstone, just to establish what was meant, but which needed more clarity in the wording. So that motion comes from staff and is agreed to by all. Then there's a motion also from staff on small moments. And that's a policy idea that has arisen as a result of the joint agreement. It's for the middle area, that's the 9-story area. And there was a request to have higher buildings if a small moment was provided by the developer. Small moments is not defined. Whether that's to be owned by the public or owned by the corporation or owned by the condominium is not established. So what the staff are suggesting is the concept is very interesting. What we do need, though, be it resolved that the small moments recommendation be the subject of a study to be included in the Planning and Growth Management Department 2014 work program. So the department has committed to look at that policy on a citywide basis, see how we can use it, how we can work with the other departments, including, of course, the Recreation Department, to bring this forward as a result of the study ongoing in 2014. Then, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the last matter is a residential mixed-use motion from myself and Councillor Clark. The last remaining problem in this whole area is the fact that that central character area from Cartier to Kent and from about Cooper to Argyll, that whole central area now has office uses, commercial uses proposed in this plan. Now, for the last 30 years, it has been residential only, so as to provide the residential capacity to help Bank Street and Elgin Street, and, of course, to feed into the central area. So this is going to be a change, adding commercial uses and retail uses into that residential area. Some of those buildings are only 3 stories high, and we're talking about 1- and 2-story commercial ability in those buildings, which will leave a 3rd story of residential. It would work in a larger building, but many of those buildings are going to stay 3 stories. So over time, you'll look down a street and you'll see commercial signs all the way down that street, and it will have the appearance then really of a commercial area rather than a residential area. So the motion here is to remove that mixed-use residential zone, to return it to a residential zone, as it has been for the last 30 years. It will increase in height because it's the middle area, so it will go from 4 to 9 stories. But I'm asking that the commercial use be deleted and this be strictly a residential area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Home. Should we hear from staff first? Would your staff like to comment now or wait till Councillor Hume speaks? Can we hear from staff, please, on the 3 motions Councillor move?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you. The councillor has outlined very well the motions that have been put forward in front of you today, and I would concur that it's been an interesting process, and as staff we have learned a lot with working with the Community Association and the development industry. And what we have before you and the 2 motions that have been described are certainly what we would recommend and put forward to you today. The 3rd motion, in particular, that the councillor has just outlined, staff would not support the 3rd motion. Specifically, we are looking and examining new ways of living. Part of the proposal that we're putting forward here is to have an opportunity for people to live, work, and play in their community. So although 30 years ago this was a residential area, we do really believe that this has changed and evolved, and that through our study and research it's a more sustainable approach to looking at offering people the opportunity to, within their community, their urban community, be able to grab a coffee on their ground floor. Perhaps it's an office space, a doctor's office, a home business that you could provide. So we really do believe that from a good planning principle perspective, in order to live, work, and play and shop in your neighborhood, this is a great way to improve our urban fabric.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hume is our Chair of Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think if, just on a point of order, Mr. Mayor,
if you'd split off, I think the first, is it 2 motions, so the small moments and the staff response to submissions, if we could take that and deal with that, because I think that there's broad support for that. I think we need to speak to and debate the Holmes-Clark motion.
If I just for clarification, what I'm going to recommend is the first motion is the Holmes-Clark, because we have to vote on that first, then followed by what's called the omnibus motion, and then followed by the small moments. Because if motion number 1 passes, we have to amend motion number 2.
Right.
So I think if you would give us your counsel on the residential mixed use, that's the one that staff are not recommending, I believe. And I believe there's support for the omnibus and small moments. So if you'd like to take the floor on that, please.
So, sorry, Mr. Mayor, are you talking to me? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will do that. Planning Committee follows a fairly, I want to say, rigorous process when it deals with some of these larger policy issues, in that we are very deliberate, and because we understand that a motion on the fly or on the floor is very can have substantial impact on the policy as it's brought forward, because as Councillor Holmes rightly points out, you're in a process that is very long in duration. It's very considered. So what you see before you in the small moments motion and the omnibus motion are the very considered response to what we heard at Planning Committee. So I would encourage you, members of Council, to vote for that. They should also, members of Council should also understand that we have the support for the plan that we have in front of us is growing. You'll have received an email from Neil Mahatra, one of Ottawa's major developers, who says, listen, I support this plan. This is a good plan. It will serve the future well. We will be doing a number of things. We'll be doing small moments, but we'll also be strengthening the heritage in that area, because we've committed to undertaking the heritage work that needs to be done in the Golden Triangle and in the areas in which the broader plan recommends. However, Mr. Mayor, the one part of the plan that is the subject of a motion that staff don't support is the residential mixed use clause. And I'm going to urge you, although I understand where Councillor Holmes is coming from, I'm going to urge you not to support that, because I don't think it reflects the modern reality of an urban city. At one time, this would have been, and I think it was, at one time, incredibly appropriate to separate those uses. You have your commercial area and you have your residential area, because at the time, I'm not sure that cities were sophisticated enough to be able to contain that growth. And as what you got is you got a tremendous erosion of your residential areas. That's not the reality that we see on the ground today. What this residential mixed-use zone promotes is it promotes that philosophy that you'll be able to work, you'll be able to live, and you'll be able to shop in virtually the same location that you live. So you'll be able to go down, maybe get to your office on the second floor. There may be a coffee shop on the ground floor. So it promotes that very urban fabric, that integration of the living and the working programs that we all are aspiring to. We all want our downtown to be vibrant. You don't want to have to go out of your building and walk 10 blocks to the coffee shop. So what this residential mixed-use zone does, in a very, very focused and small way, is it allows those coffee shops to be established on the ground floor or the second floor only of buildings. And I think, in fact, if I would be more specific, you'd have those uses along the ground floor. You may have a small office use, whether it's a dental office or whether it's whatever other office use you could see right in that zone. But that's where it stops. And I think that it is an appropriate evolution of the urban fabric in these communities to allow that organic change to happen. The idea that we're going to draw that line and you're crossing the demilitarized zone from commercial, from the coffee shops to the residential area, I think is something that harkens back to a time when Centertown needed to be protected. I don't think that exists today. And if there are issues around signage and those other things that the mixed-use area will bring, we'll deal with that. I mean, there are very creative ways to be able to manage those issues, and those are management issues. But as a broad policy, members of council, the mixed-use zone that was been recommended by George Dark and is supported by our staff is the right way to move as we evolve and as this Centertown plan evolves the core of our city. So I would encourage you and really ask you to not to vote for Councillor Holmes's motion and vote for the what is contained in the plan as recommended to you by George Dark and our staff.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So we have Councillor Chernachenko and then Councillor Clark.
I guess I'd like to seek some clarification on the nature of the type of commercial activity that could occur if we were to say go with the staff recommendation here as opposed to Councillor Holmes's motion. I think back to my first 2 weeks here on council, the tail end of a raging debate of outdoor patios that were moving from Elgin Street around the corner and starting to march down residential streets. And the concern, those ultimately, majority of council passed them, and the concern of the neighbors being that there are certain kinds of activities that you don't want to see and listen to outside your window late hours or early hours. I have heard the more benign ones, the coffee shop, the dental, the doctor's office, the home business, but there are some that are far from benign in a residential area where people do and want to sleep. Are we being prescriptive enough here? Can we be? I do have worry about that.
Mr. Mayor, through you, just maybe to clarify with this particular area of the mixed-use centre, this doesn't indicate to development that they must provide for commercial uses. This just allows and is a little more permissive. So in fact, someone could have a full building of 9 stories of a residential nature. Now, if they chose to, the bottom 2 floors could be considered the particular uses of retail, small-scale commercial, such as personal services, offices, could be daycares provided, coffee shops, those sorts of amenities to help support living in a community.
If I may, then I didn't quite hear a specific type of use that I raised as the least benign on a residential street. I can't imagine my street suddenly having in the middle of it a bar open to all hours. Is that a possible scenario here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'd have to clarify that, but there could be the option of a restaurant.
So you could have an outdoor patio as it is currently described. Okay, that causes me a great concern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am supporting this for a reason. The reason is that the definition of mixed use is too vague, too open-ended, and as was pointed out, the putting a bar or a pub or for argument's sake, even a jazz club in the middle of a residential area doesn't seem to make sense to me. And it does for my friend here, he's a lot younger. I just think that we need to look at a better definition of what we mean by mixed use, because an open-ended one is, to my view, while it might not limit you in a planning sense, it can limit you in what I'll call the practical realities. If you say that, then they'll, no matter what use they suggest, is going to say, well, it's all right, it's in this particular CDP. And that worries me a little bit because it is too open-ended.
Mr. Mayor, through you, just to clarify, we're now speaking only at the policy level. We haven't completed the zoning yet, so we could put a restriction in that we would not be allowing a nightclub to be included, or restaurant.
Okay. Clark, Councillor, anything else?
No. Well, you'll just put in that restriction, and then the other restriction, and the other restriction, and the other restriction, till we have a forest of restrictions, as well as a forest of 9-story buildings with 27-story accents. Anyway, I just still say I think it's too wide open, even for a policy document.
Okay. So we have 3 motions. The first is Councillor Holmes and Clark. As presented, the second is Holmes and Hume, and the third is Holmes and Hume. So I believe since there are some people who have spoken against Councillor Holmes, there's a yeas and nays request for this one. The first motion, which says residential mixed use. Deputy Clerk.
Councillor Harder? Conseiller
No.
Blais?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
No.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
Yes.
Councillor Hume? No. Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor Tierney?
No.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
No.
Councillor Deans?
No.
Councillor McCrae? Conseiller Manette?
No.
Conseiller Fleury?
No.
Councillor Eglai?
No.
Councillor Caudry?
No.
Councillor Hobbs?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
No.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Blois?
No.
Councillor Clark? Councillor DeRoche?
No.
Councillor Wilkinson?
No.
Councillor El-Shantiri?
No.
Mayor Watson?
No.
5 yeas, 19 nays.
The next motion is the omnibus motion, moved by Councillor Holmes, seconded by Councillor Hume. Carried. The next is the small moments motion, moved by Councillor Holmes, seconded by Councillor Hume. Carried. On the main report as amended. Carried. Okay. Motions to adopt reports. Councillor El-Shantiri and Holmes, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. That moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Holmes, that Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 32 and Finance Economic Development Committee and Governance Renewal Subcommittee Joint Report 3 and Planning Committee Report 46C and 47B and 48A be received and adopted as amended. Okay.
Carried. Motions of which notice have been given previously. Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Hubley. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this motion moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Hubley with regard to the latest iteration of taxi issues. We are asking that the general manager, the response by staff on various taxi-related motions of April 2012 be further deferred so that staff have the time to take into account the various other components that we're seeking would come together in a final report, including specifically paratranspo and our consideration of our ongoing bandit cab initiatives. And be it further resolved that the General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services be directed to strike an internal working group among bylaw and regulatory services, transit services, city clerk and solicitor, and other affected areas of the city to further review the April 11, 2012 taxi-related inquiries and the evolving areas noted above, and to conduct further consultation with stakeholders within the taxi industry, the accessible community, the new Accessibility Advisory Committee, and the public on these issues, and to report back when completed with information and recommendations on these issues.
Councillor Deans? I'm sorry, did you wish to speak, Councillor Taylor, to your motion?
I just wanted to perhaps say that obviously that the taxi file is always a hot issue when you touch it, but the goal obviously is that we want to make sure that we get this right. And the more that staff dug into it, the more it became apparent that there are separate pieces of our puzzle that could be better brought together in one cohesive report. Specifically, as was laid out in the motion, kind of the evolution of paratranspo and where that is going to go and how that would interact with our accessible taxi fleet, and a further need to provide for further accessible taxis as our older adult population evolves faster than our general population, and as well our bandit cab issue and how that touches other existing city licensed carriers such as limousines, which this was never contemplated in the original kind of iteration of reform. So we'd like the opportunity to package everything together so that we're not dealing piecemeal with this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions for Ms. Jones. The first one is Council asked, I think over a year ago, for you to come back with a series of recommendations. I'm just wondering if you have drafted that report.
Yes, through the Mayor to Councillor Dean. So we did draft a report, and it really, I guess, essentially is a position paper that we began to float out to members of the industry to gauge reaction. So yes, there is a draft report.
Okay, and is it are you in agreement with the mover of the motion that you would benefit from more time to study this issue and to package the issues together as the mover of the motion suggested?
Yes, through the Mayor, absolutely are in agreement. We actually recommended it to the Chair. We recognize that when we initially put the position report out, there were a number of stakeholders who we had yet to consult with, which included the Accessibility Advisory Committee. They had not been formed at that point. In addition, we're recognizing that this is not only an initiative that's being looked at in Ottawa, it's being looked at across Ontario. In fact, I'll be in Toronto next week attending a seminar. I'm actually the moderator at it with Ontario regulators to talk about the future of accessible taxi cab service. And we're also looking closely at New York City right now, which is also considering a similar initiative to convert all 13,000 taxis in New York City to make them accessible.
So your recommendation, if it were before Council today, would be to make the fleet entirely accessible over time by any transfer of a plate that would come back would become an accessible plate.
That's the position we've taken right now, but we've recognized that there's a number of factors in relation to the entire taxi industry, including the delivery of paratranspo in the future. And as well, we're undertaking extensive enforcement on the bandit cab program. We're intending to take a blitz in the next few months. We want to look at that information as well because we have looked to the province to give us additional powers. So we feel that by doing the investigation, encompassing all the issues that we're dealing with in the delivery of public transportation service in the city that we regulate, that we can come back with a more robust and comprehensive report and Council can make the appropriate decisions.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Ms. Jones. Just wondering how much, the motion is silent on when you would report back. How much time do you feel you need?
Well, I think we've yet to sit down with our partners at OC Transpo, and we have to look at what their future model is because we recognize that our taxi service and our accessible taxi service right now in particular does do work with PARA, and we know that we shouldn't be making recommendations with respect to accessible taxi cab service until Council decides the future PARA and how we're going to improve in that regard. And also I think we want to do a more in-depth analysis of the demographics of our city and looking at the needs of our future residents in terms of accessibility service and transportation.
Okay, thank you for the answer. I'm not sure I heard the answer.
Well, I can't be I can't be finite right now until there's so many other parties we have to talk to in terms of coming forward. Ideally, I would like to be able to come back within the next year, but recognize that that may not be possible if all the other service areas haven't finalized where they're going with it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor El Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will be supporting the motion, but I couldn't help but to think. Now we say we need time to think and consult, talk to the stakeholder, make all this, and a year and a half ago we shoved something we worked on 10 years prior to it. But nevertheless, it's never too late to do the right thing. And Ms. Jones, I would like you to include with this is the taxi union as well, because we are tinkering with people's livelihood every time we make those changes. And I hope for those the same people we didn't consult the last time, we consult them this time, so we don't hear from them in a church or in a parking lot, or every time we take a cab, we hear about how the city is misused that industry and disrespected, especially with the last time event. But nevertheless, I'm pleased to see more consultation is going to take place this time than the last time, because the last time we botched what we did in the past 10 years.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on the motion as presented, carried. Before I neglected to mention a good friend of many people around the council table, Linda Smith, last week was honored by her MPP when she was presented with a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for all her volunteer work. So congratulations, Linda. We're very proud of you. Well done. The next motion is by Councillor Holmes. I think I saw Councillor Holmes. Maybe Councillor Fleury, if you'd like to move the motion, and who would like to second? Second, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Fleury?
Yes, so this motion is about some of the challenges we have when the approvals process goes through when we have an established BIA zone. And as I see Councillor Holmes walking over, I'll ask her to maybe elaborate more. But really, it's the approvals around BIA murals. So in our BIA zone, sometimes it gets a little conflicting supporting our BIAs while following the current process.
Councillor Holmes, mic, please.
Thank you. This is the Somerset BIA that has an agreement with the School of Art to paint all their windows and doors with artistic designs. Many of these buildings don't have sides. They abut each other, and they only have front windows and doors. But our bylaw says you can only paint the side of your buildings. You can't paint the windows and doors. So this is a request that we amend that bylaw so that, in fact, the BIA can have this painting process for their buildings in Chinatown.
Okay, on the motion, carried. Adopté. Merci. A motion requiring suspension of the rules. Councillor Shirelli, seconded by Councillor Hubley from the Audit Committee on the Auditor General's succession plan. On suspension, carried. Councillor Shirelli, please, to introduce.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is to follow the process we've agreed to over time regarding the Auditor General position. Whereas in September 2003, Ottawa City Council became one of the first municipalities in Canada to voluntarily establish a position of Auditor General based on the report by Mr. Denis Deshotels, the former Auditor General of Canada. And whereas in October 2003, City Council approved the retention of an external search firm to assist the staffing the new City Auditor General position based on Mr. Deshotels' comments, and that when searching for such a position, it would be most important to put in place a process that would be totally impartial and that would identify candidates of the highest quality, and Council and the Audit Committee should seek the help of professional accounting organizations in searching for candidates, as is done at other levels of government. And whereas In March 2004, Corporate Services and Economic Development Committee established an Auditor General hiring subcommittee selection panel comprised of the Mayor, Chair, the Committee Vice Chair, and one other committee member. And whereas in July 2004, City Council approved the appointment of Mr. Alain Lalonde as the city's first Auditor General for a fixed term that is currently set to expire on January 6, 2014. And whereas the city is required by the Employment Standards Act 2001 and regulations to give minimum 8 weeks notice to an employee in this position that the employment will terminate on expiry of the fixed term. And whereas it is important the city continue to employ the principle of total impartiality first recognized by Mr. Deshotel in undertaking a search for candidates of the highest quality for a new Auditor General, and in an effort to ensure a timely and smooth transition regarding the succession matter, therefore be it resolved that City Council, 1, thank Mr. Lalonde for the valuable auditing work that he has undertaken for the City of Ottawa over his tenure. 2, provide Mr. Lalonde with written notice in compliance with the Employment Standards Act 2001 and regulations. 3, approve the Mayor as Chair, the Chair and Vice Chair of the Audit Subcommittee, and the 2 Deputy Mayors to be the hiring panel to interview candidates for the position of City Auditor General. 4, approve the engagement of an external search firm to assist the hiring panel in undertaking an executive search for the new Auditor General to an upset limit of $50,000. 5, direct the City Clerk and Solicitor's Office to provide the required administrative support for the hiring panel. And 6, direct the hiring panel to report back to City Council by Q4 of 2013 with a recommended candidate for Council's approval as the new AG.
Okay, so my thanks to Councillors Hubley and Shirelli from the Audit Subcommittee and the City Clerk's Office, I believe, for assisting with the drafting, and to thank Mr. Lalonde formally. We'll have a more opportune time to thank him as well closer to his retirement. On the motion, carried. Notice is a motion for consideration at subsequent meetings. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to read the motion. We can talk about it next council meeting. Whereas Canadian demographics indicate that seniors are one of the fastest growing population groups in our communities, with nationwide projections that by 2036 their numbers will represent 24.5% or 9.8 million citizens. And whereas according to the 2006 census from Statistics Canada, over 100,000 seniors aged 65 and over reside in the City of Ottawa, and that number is expected that by the year 2031 the number will grow to approximately 230,000 seniors. And whereas the City of Ottawa has benefited from the many tireless hours of volunteer work and leadership generously donated by local senior citizens, and whereas senior citizens have helped to build our communities through active living, shared knowledge, and a diversity of experiences, and whereas the month of June is recognized by the Province of Ontario as Seniors Month, therefore be it resolved that Ottawa City Council declare June 2013 to be Seniors Month in the City of Ottawa.
Okay, so that's seconded by, I believe, Councillor Wilkinson. So that motion we'll deal with at our next council meeting. Are there any other notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meeting? Est-ce qu'il y a des autres avis de motion?
Any other notice of motion?
Motion to introduce bylaws. Councillor El-Shantiri and Holmes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Holmes, that the bylaw listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaw 3 reading be read and passed.
Carried.
Okay.
Confirmation bylaw. Councillor El-Shantiri.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceeding of the council meeting of May 8, 2013.
Carried.
Okay.
Have we received any written inquiries, Madam Deputy Clerk? Adjournment. Councillor El-Shantiri.
By Councillor Holmes, that the proceeding of the City Council meeting of 8 May 2013 be adjourned.
Carried. Just to remind members of council and staff, good news, bad news story. The food trucks, which are a new project of the city, 11 of them are set up outside. That's the good news. The bad news is that in the first half hour, all 500 wristbands were sold. But the Tulip Festival food vendors are still available on site as well, and all of the funds going from the wristbands are going to the Shepherds of Good Hope. So if you have a wristband, you can head out. Thank you.